I was living quietly as a carpenter when my son called after 20 years of silence. He didn't ask how I was. He said my ex-wife was dead and ordered me to attend to a reading, just to watch me get nothing. In the lawyer's office, he laughed, handed me $15, and told everyone it was my worth. I stayed silent and waited. Then the lawyer turned the page, and the room stopped breathing. Before I tell you how that sentence unraveled an empire and exposed a lie buried for 2 decades, do me a quick favor. Tap subscribe, leave a comment where you're listening from, and help this story reach the people who understand what it means when silence finally decides to speak. For 5 years, my world had been small and honest. Dry Creek, New Mexico doesn't ask questions. It doesn't care who you used to be. Out here, the air smells like dust and pine sap, and the rhythm of your days is set by your hands, not your reputation. My workshop sat behind a modest one-story house at the edge of town. Tin roof, cracked concrete floor, one window facing the desert. That window was my favorite thing. Every morning, sunlight poured through it in long golden stripes, cutting across stacks of walnut planks and half-finished furniture. I wasn't an architect anymore. I wasn't a disgraced name whispered behind glass conference doors. In that room, I was just Elias Rowan, a carpenter shaping something solid out of raw pieces. Wood doesn't lie. It splits where it's weak. It bends when pushed too far. You learn to respect it, or it punishes you. The planer screamed as it cut through a slab of walnut, shaving it smooth. The smell of sawdust hung heavy in the air. My hands, scarred, thick, steady, guided the piece without thought. I was building a rocking chair, not for anyone in particular, just because the curve felt right. Then my phone vibrated. I shut off the planer. The sudden silence rang in my ears. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked to the workbench where my old flip phone lay face down. 2 words on the screen. Victor Rowan, 20 years. That's how long it had been since my son called without wanting something. No birthdays, no holidays, no updates, just demands, insults, and then eventually nothing at all. I stared at the name longer than I should have. Part of me hoped it would stop ringing, like a test I could fail on purpose. It didn't. I flipped it open. Hello. Elias, Victor said. He never called me Dad. Not since the courtrooms. Not since the lies settled in. Celeste is dead. The words landed without weight at first, like they belonged to someone else's life. Stroke, he continued. Quick, efficient, no suffering. Celeste Rowan. Brilliant, ruthless. The woman who built Aurelian Group Holdings from a rented office and a vision sharp enough to cut glass. My ex-wife. My greatest ally once. My greatest mistake. Gone. I leaned against the workbench, staring out at the desert beyond the window. The sky was too blue for news like that. When is the funeral? I asked. It's over, Victor said flatly. You weren't invited. Of course. This is why I'm calling. He went on. The attorneys require your presence. Reading of the will. Friday, 10 sharp. Arthur Bellamy's office. Stonebridge City. Don't be late. I don't need to be there, I said. Whatever Celeste left, it's not mine. Victor laughed. A short, ugly sound. Oh, you're right. You're getting nothing. That's the point. He paused, letting it sink in. This is a formality. A legal courtesy. You need to hear officially how little you mattered. My grip tightened on the edge of the bench. Why? I asked quietly. Because I want to see your face, he said. I want to watch you realize it was all worth it for me. Another pause. I'll even help you get home. $15. Cash. Don't say I never did anything for you. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed in my ear, listening to nothing. The desert wind rattled the workshop door. Victor didn't call me to settle anything. He called to bury me. Publicly, legally, and with an audience. Fine. I closed the phone and set it down carefully, like it might explode if mishandled. I walked back to the rocking chair and ran my hand along the curved armrest. Smooth, honest, real. Then I went inside. At the back of my closet, Beneath flannel shirts and dust-stained jackets hung a garment bag I hadn't touched in 20 years. I unzipped it. Inside was a charcoal gray suit. Good wool. Old cut. Too much shoulder padding. The suit I wore when my life ended the first time. I pressed it that night. Friday morning came faster than I expected. Stonebridge City rose out of the horizon like a wall of steel and glass. Crown Spire Tower dominated the skyline, cold, polished, untouchable. Arthur Bellamy's firm occupied the upper floors. The kind of place built to make people feel small before they ever open their mouths. I paid the cab and stepped onto the sidewalk. The air smelled like money and exhaust. Inside, the lobby was marble and silence. Every footstep echoed like an accusation. Young professionals in tailored suits glanced up, assessed me, and dismissed me in a single look. I didn't belong. Good. The receptionist barely hid her confusion when I gave my name, then gestured toward a leather seating area. I sat, hands folded, back straight. I wasn't there to beg. They arrived like they owned the room. Victor first. Tailored navy suit, perfect posture, a man who had never doubted his own importance. At his side was Lena Cross, all sharp angles and designer confidence. Behind them, Brent Holloway, smiling too much, eyes always calculating. Victor stopped when he saw me. "Well, look at that," he said loudly. "You actually came." He looked me over slowly, savoring it. "Guess $15 really matters when this is all you got left." Lena laughed. Brent smiled. I said nothing. That unsettled him more than any insult could have. Arthur Bellamy appeared then, gray-haired, measured, unreadable. He acknowledged me first. "Mr. Rowan," he said, "thank you for coming." Victor noticed. His jaw tightened. The doors to the conference room opened, and as we walked inside, I understood something with absolute clarity. Victor thought this was the end. He had no idea it was only the beginning. The conference room felt colder than the lobby. Not physically. No, this cold came from precision, from intent, from the way the long obsidian table reflected our faces like a dark mirror, forcing you to look at yourself whether you wanted to or not. Victor took the seat at the far end without being invited. Power seat, head of the table. He leaned back, arms spread casually, like a king waiting for tribute. Lena slid into the chair beside him, crossing her legs, already bored. Brent chose the other side, setting his briefcase down with deliberate care, eyes flicking constantly, counting exits, reading angles. I took the chair closest to the door, not because it was offered to me, because it was assumed. Arthur Bellamy didn't sit immediately. He placed a thick leather-bound folder on the table instead. The sound it made was soft, but final, like a coffin lid settling into place. "Before we begin," Bellamy said calmly, "I remind all present that this reading is a legal proceeding. Interruptions will not be tolerated." Victor smirked. "Of course." Bellamy adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. "This is the last will and testament of Celeste Merrill Rowan, dated September 14th of this year. All previous wills are hereby revoked." Victor exhaled impatiently. Bellamy began. "I direct that all outstanding debts and expenses be paid in full." Standard language. Victor drummed his fingers lightly, already impatient. "I bequeath $50,000 to my longtime housekeeper, Anna Morales, in gratitude for her loyalty and discretion." Victor rolled his eyes. "Next," Bellamy continued, $100,000 to the Northern Monarch Conservation Trust." Lena scoffed. "Butterflies? Seriously." Victor waved it off. "Keep going." Bellamy didn't look at him. "I leave $25,000 to my driver, Raul Estevez, for never asking questions and never speaking out of turn." Brent's smile tightened. "Just a fraction." Victor leaned forward. "Bellamy, can we skip the charity and staff bonuses? Let's get to the real part." Bellamy stopped reading. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his glasses and set them on the table. "Mr. Rowan," he said evenly, "your mother instructed me to read every word. I intend to do exactly that." The room went still. Victor stared at him, then leaned back again with forced calm. "Fine. Waste your time." Bellamy resumed. Several minor bequests followed. Art to museums, jewelry to distant relatives, endowments Victor had never heard of and didn't care about. Each one chipped away at his patience. Finally, Bellamy turned the page. We now come to Article 7. Victor sat up. To my son, Victor Rowan, Bellamy read. Victor smiled. I bequeath a penthouse residence at Crescent Tower. Victor's smile widened. My complete collection of Valcourt timepieces. Victor let out a short laugh and glanced at me, triumph glowing in his eyes. And Bellamy continued, the remainder of my liquid investment portfolio. There it is, Victor murmured. Subject, Bellamy added, to the conditions outlined herein. Victor's smile froze. The Valcourt collection is secured within the penthouse vault. The sole key to that vault, Bellamy paused, has been entrusted to Elias Rowan. The silence was violent. Victor stared at Bellamy, then at me, then back at Bellamy. What? He said quietly. The key, Bellamy repeated unflinching, is in the possession of your father. That's not possible, Victor snapped. He hasn't seen her in 20 years. Brent shifted in his seat. This must be a mistake, Lena said sharply. It is not, Bellamy replied. Victor stood abruptly, chair scraping across the floor. This is a stunt. A joke. She wouldn't. She did, Bellamy said, and she documented it extensively. Victor turned to me, eyes burning. Where is it? I shook my head slowly. I don't know what you're talking about. That was the truth. Victor laughed, too loudly. Doesn't matter. I'll have the safe drilled open before lunch. Bellamy didn't react. Proceed, Victor snapped. Bellamy turned the page. To my ex-husband, Elias Rowan, he read, I leave $15. Victor burst out laughing. Oh my God, he gasped. She actually did it. Lena joined in. Brent smiled again, relieved. $15, Victor repeated, tears of laughter in his eyes. For the bus ride home. He pulled a 20 from his wallet and flicked it across the table toward me. Keep the change. I didn't move. Victor straightened, smug satisfaction settling back into place. That's it, Bellamy. We're done. He stood. Sit down, Bellamy said. Victor froze. I am not finished. Bellamy reached into his briefcase and removed a second folder, thin, sealed with red wax. This, he said, placing beside the will, is a codicil, executed 3 weeks before Ms. Rowan's death. Victor's color drained. It supersedes all prior articles related to the primary estate. No, Victor whispered. Bellamy broke the seal. This document includes a letter, written by your mother, addressed to you, to be read aloud. Victor shook his head violently. She wasn't well. This is invalid. Bellamy lifted another document. A full psychiatric evaluation conducted 72 hours prior. Your mother was, and I quote, mentally acute, fully lucid, and entirely competent. The room felt smaller. Bellamy began to read. To my son, Victor. The voice wasn't Bellamy's anymore. It was Celeste's. For 20 years, I allowed you to believe a lie. I told you your father was a criminal, that he betrayed me, that he destroyed our family. Victor's breathing quickened. That was false. The truth is this. I failed. I made reckless decisions that put my company and myself on the brink of prison. When the consequences arrived, your father chose to carry them for me. My chest tightened. He took responsibility so I could remain free. He lost his license, his career, his name. He did it so you could have the life you now take for granted. Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I let you hate him because it was easier than admitting my cowardice. Brent stood slowly and quietly back toward the door. I built my fortune on his sacrifice, the letter continued, and I let him be destroyed for it. Victor collapsed into his chair. Bellamy's voice remained steady. Therefore, I leave the entirety of my estate, real, personal, and corporate, valued at approximately $160 million, to Elias Rowan. The room shattered. Victor screamed. Lena stood up, backing away in horror. That's impossible, Victor choked. That's impossible. Bellamy slid one final check across the table. For Victor Rowan, he said flatly, $15. Security appeared at the door. Victor lunged toward me, but never reached halfway. They restrained him easily. As he was dragged out, screaming my name, I sat perfectly still, because in that moment, I finally understood this wasn't about money. It was about truth, and it had just finished waiting. Victor Rowan's laughter was still echoing in the polished conference room when Arthur Bellamy slowly closed the leather-bound folder. The sound was deliberate, final. Victor was on his feet now, straightening the cuffs of his tailored jacket, already halfway into celebration mode. Brent Holloway leaned in, whispering something with a forced grin, while Lena cross-checked her phone, as if this entire moment was merely background noise to her life. "Guess that's it," Victor said lightly, tossing a glance in my direction. $15. I'll have accounting send it over, unless you prefer cash for the bus. He chuckled again, satisfied with himself, and turned toward the door. Arthur Bellamy didn't move. "Mr. Rowan," he said calmly. Victor paused, hand still on the chair back. "Yes." "Please sit down." The room changed. Victor turned slowly, irritation flickering across his face. "What for?" "You're done." Arthur removed his glasses with careful precision and placed them atop the folder. His eyes were sharp now, no longer neutral. "No," he said, "I am not." A thin, sealed envelope appeared in his hands. Cream paper, heavy stock, a crimson seal pressed into its center. Victor frowned. "What is that?" "A codicil," Arthur replied. "Executed 3 weeks ago. Properly witnessed. Fully enforceable." The color drained from Victor's face. "That's not possible," he snapped. "My mother was barely—" Arthur lifted a second document. A medical evaluation conducted by 3 independent specialists from Stonebridge Neurological Institute. All concurred she was of sound mind, full capacity, and mentally acute. Silence pressed down on the room. Arthur broke the seal. "This is a letter," he said, "written by Celeste Rowan, addressed to her son." Victor shook his head slowly. No. This is a trick." Arthur began to read. "Victor, if you are hearing this, it means I am gone, and it means I waited too long to tell the truth." Victor's breathing became shallow. "For 20 years, I let you believe a lie. A lie that painted your father as a criminal and me as his victim. That lie spared me shame, but it destroyed him." Brent shifted uncomfortably. Lena's phone lowered inch by inch. "The truth is this. When Aurelian Group Holdings was collapsing, I made decisions that bordered on criminal negligence. I was facing prosecution, prison, ruin. My hands clenched under the table. Your father stepped in. He took control. He handled the contracts, the transfers, the meetings I was too afraid to attend. He built a firewall that kept my name clean and put his own on the line instead." Victor whispered, "She's lying." Arthur didn't pause. When authorities came, they came for him. Because he designed it that way, he confessed to lesser crimes to shield me from worse ones. He sacrificed his career, his reputation, and his marriage so that you could have the life you take for granted. Victor stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough," he shouted. "This is fake. She was manipulated." Arthur raised a hand. "Sit down." Victor froze. "I let you despise him because it was easier than admitting my cowardice. I let you call him nothing, because acknowledging his sacrifice meant confronting my betrayal." My throat tightened. "The fortune you believe is yours exists only because your father saved it." Arthur lifted his gaze. "Which is why, Victor, I am correcting my final mistake." Victor's lips trembled. "No." Arthur turned the page. "All remaining assets," he read, "including controlling interest in Aurelian Group Holdings, all real estate, liquid holdings, trusts, and intellectual property, are hereby bequeathed to Elias Rowan." The room collapsed into silence. Victor staggered backward. "To my ex-husband," Arthur continued, "not as a gift, but as repayment." Brent's chair scraped loudly as he stood. I think I'll step out," he muttered. already moving toward the door. Lena didn't bother with words. She simply walked away. Victor stared at me, eyes wide, hollow. You planned this. I said nothing. Arthur slid a final item across the table. A check. Victor looked down. $15. Arthur's voice was cold. As specified. Victor screamed. He lunged. Security was faster. As Victor was dragged away, kicking and shouting, Arthur turned to me. She left one more thing, he said softly. He placed a small brass key into my palm. This, he said, is the real inheritance. And only then did I understand. This was never about money. It was about truth. And it was just beginning. The door closed behind Victor Rowan with a hollow, final sound. For a moment, no one spoke. The conference room smelled faintly of spilled water and expensive cologne. Shattered glass glittered near the wall where Victor had lashed out. The $15 check still lay on the table, untouched, absurdly small against the dark mahogany. Arthur Bellamy waited until the echoes of shouting faded down the corridor before he spoke again. Mr. Rowan, he said, turning toward me, there are matters that still require your attention. I stared at the table, at my hands. Hands that smelled faintly of sawdust even after scrubbing. Hands that had built furniture, fixed hinges, sanded away imperfections. Not hands meant to hold keys to empires. I never asked for this, I said quietly. Arthur nodded once. She knew you wouldn't. That answer hurt more than anything Victor had said. Arthur gathered the documents with practiced care, aligning their edges. Celeste anticipated your reaction. She left explicit instructions regarding the transition. I finally looked up. She always did like control. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. Yes, she did. He slid another folder toward me, thicker than the rest, heavier. This contains immediate steps, board notifications, interim authority filings, security transfers. I pushed it back. Not today. Arthur studied me for a long moment. You have 72 hours before certain clauses activate automatically. I said not today. He inclined his head. As you wish. The silence returned, heavier now. Arthur broke it gently. There is one more item you should see. He reached into his briefcase again and produced a sealed envelope, smaller than the others. No legal markings. No letterhead. This was not part of the will, he said. She instructed me to give it to you only if you accepted the key. I hadn't accepted anything, but the key was still in my pocket, its weight undeniable. I took the envelope. Celeste's handwriting covered the front. Precise. Familiar. I didn't open it. Not yet. We left the building together. Arthur walked slightly ahead, clearing paths with murmured instructions to staff who suddenly treated me differently. Doors opened faster. Elevators arrived instantly. Outside, Stonebridge City moved on like nothing had happened. Taxis honked. Pedestrians rushed past. Somewhere, someone laughed. Arthur paused at the curb. I'll arrange transportation and security. You should not return to Dry Creek immediately. I don't need security. You didn't need it yesterday either. That landed. He handed me a card. Call me when you're ready. I watched him disappear into traffic, then stood there alone, clutching an envelope and a future I didn't recognize. I walked. No destination. Just movement. The city felt louder now, sharper. Every reflection in glass startled me. Every passing face felt like a witness. By the time I reached a small, nearly empty cafe, my legs ached. I sat in a corner booth and ordered coffee I didn't drink. Only then did I open the envelope. Inside was a letter. No legal language. No defenses. Just her voice. Elias, if you're reading this, then I finally told the truth out loud. I'm sorry it took dying to find courage. I swallowed. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I built my life on brilliance and fear, and when fear finally cornered me, I chose survival over honor. I closed my eyes. You gave me everything when I had nothing left. My name, my freedom, my son's future. I repaid you with silence and distance. Outside, rain began to fall. The money is not an apology. It's a confession. I needed the world to know who saved what I built. My hands trembled. Victor was my greatest failure, not because he is cruel, but because I taught him cruelty with strength. I picture my son screaming as security dragged him away. The key opens more than a door. What you choose to do with it is yours alone. Burn it, bury it, or use it to make something honest out of what I corrupted. The letter ended simply. I loved you the only way I knew how. I'm sorry it wasn't enough. I sat there for a long time. When the cafe closed, I walked again. That night, I didn't sleep. The penthouse at Crown Spire Tower was exactly what Victor had described. Marble floors, glass walls, a view that swallowed the city whole. Security waited silently as I entered, as if I had always belonged there. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the study. The painting Arthur had mentioned hung exactly where he'd said it would. A muted, abstract piece Celeste had once mocked as expensive nonsense. Behind it, a wall safe. The brass key slid in smoothly. Inside were folders, drives, paper trails, 20 years of truth, emails, contracts, transfer logs, signed instructions in Celeste's hand begging me to take control, begging me to save her, evidence enough to burn reputations, enough to collapse industries. I closed the safe. I understood then why she'd left the choice to me. Power always comes at a cost. By morning, the board of Aurelian Group Holdings was demanding answers. Journalists sniffed around Stonebridge like sharks. Victor's outburst had not gone unnoticed. Arthur called. "They'll come for you," he said calmly. "They already are. Let them. You don't understand. Victor may be finished, but others won't be. The company was built on enemies. I spent 20 years avoiding this world." I said, "I'm not afraid of it." There was a pause. Then quietly, neither was she. By evening, my face was on screens I hadn't looked at in decades. Headlines twisted the story into something unrecognizable. Disgraced ex-husband inherits fortune. Secret heir emerges after will shock her. Victor released a statement calling the will fraudulent. I didn't respond. Instead, I flew back to Dry Creek. The workshop smelled the same. Walnut dust, oil, quiet. I stood there, surrounded by half-finished chairs and tools worn smooth by use. This place had saved me once. But I knew it wouldn't be enough now, because Victor Rowan had lost everything. And men like him don't disappear quietly. They come back with lawyers, with threats, with nothing left to lose. And somewhere deep down, I understood something else. Celeste hadn't just given me her empire. She'd handed me a war, and whether I wanted it or not, it had already begun. The first thing I did was lock the workshop door, not because I was afraid of thieves. Dry Creek didn't have thieves. It had dust storms, quiet neighbors, and the kind of silence that let you hear your own thoughts echo too loudly. I locked it because for the first time in 20 years, I understood something simple and terrible. I was no longer invisible. The next morning came with a knock. Not loud, not urgent, polite, measured, the kind of knock that assumes you'll answer. I didn't. I stood in the kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hands, listening as the knock came again. Same rhythm, same restraint. When I finally opened the door, a man stood on my porch wearing a suit that didn't belong in New Mexico. Charcoal gray, perfectly pressed, shoes too clean. "Mr. Rowan," he said, smiling without warmth. "My name is Daniel Klein. I represent Victor Rowan." "Of course you do." "I'm not interested," I said. He nodded, as if I'd said exactly what he expected. "We won't take much of your time." "You already are." He glanced past me, eyes briefly scanning the interior. The shelves, the workbench, the smell of wood. He cataloged it all the way Victor did, assessing value, dismissing it. "I'm here to propose a resolution," he said. I laughed once. "Short, sharp. You dragged him out of a building in handcuffs," he continued calmly. "He lost his inheritance, his reputation, his partner, his advisor, but he's still Celeste Rowan's son. That didn't stop her." Klein's smile thinned. "No, but courts care about blood." I leaned against the doorframe. What do you want? A settlement. Of course. He produced a folder. Slim. Confident. Victor is willing to forego public litigation, he said, in exchange for a private restructuring. He retains a minority interest. You maintain control. The company avoids scandal. And if I say no, Klein's eyes harden. Then we challenge the will. We question capacity. We leak documents. We make this ugly. I thought of the wall safe. The files. The truth. I already know ugly. I said. Klein stepped closer. You don't know Victor. I raise him. No, Klein said softly. You didn't. That stung more than I expected. I'll consider it, I said. He handed me a card. You have 48 hours. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I didn't call Arthur. I went back to the workshop and ran my hands over the half-finished rocking chair. The curve was wrong. I'd rushed it. I picked up a chisel and shaved a thin curl of walnut away, correcting the line. What was honest. If you pushed too hard, it split. If you rushed, it punished you. It didn't lie. People did. By afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers. Media. Board members. People who hadn't spoken my name in decades suddenly remembered it. I ignored all of it. At dusk, I opened the wall safe again. I didn't take everything. Just one folder. The first email Celeste had sent me when everything began to collapse. The one where she admitted fault. The one that proved intent. I scanned it. Then another. Then another. By midnight, I had a digital archive. By morning, I made one call. Not to a lawyer. To Victor. He answered on the third ring. What do you want? He snapped. I got your lawyer. I said. Silence. You're not serious, he said finally. I am. A breath. Controlled. Dangerous. Then you know what I want. You don't get to want any more. His voice sharpened. You think this makes you powerful? No, I said. I think it makes me responsible. He laughed bitterly. You always did love pretending to be noble. Meet me, I said. No lawyers. No press. And why would I do that? Because if this goes to court, I said calmly, the first document entered into evidence will be Celeste's emails. All of them. Silence stretched. You wouldn't, he said. I already sent copies to Arthur. The breath he took was ragged. Where? Tomorrow. Noon. Crown Spire Tower. A pause. I'll be there, he said. And when this is over, you'll regret humiliating me. I hung up. The next day, Victor arrived thinner. His suit still expensive, but it hung differently now, like armor that didn't quite fit. We sat across from each other in the same study. No Arthur. No witnesses. You took everything, Victor said. No, I replied. I took responsibility for it. You destroyed my life. You inherited it on lies. He leaned forward. Give me control. You don't belong in that world. You're right, I said. I don't. I slid a document across the table. What's this? A trust. He scanned it quickly. His brow furrowed. You're giving me nothing. Correct. His jaw clenched. But I continued. I'm funding an independent foundation. Education. Ethics. Oversight. You'll serve on the board. His laugh was hollow. You're trying to punish me. I'm trying to stop you. His eyes burned. You think this makes you better than her? No, I said quietly. I think it makes me different. He stood abruptly. I'll fight you. I know. He paused at the door. You could have walked away. So could you. He left without another word. That night, Arthur called. He rejected the settlement, he said. I expected that. Then we proceed. No, I said. We wait. For what? For him to make a mistake. Arthur was silent. You taught me that. I added. He exhaled. Yes, I did. Weeks passed. Victor filed motions. They failed. He leaked stories. They collapsed under documentation. Then, finally, he did what desperate men always do. He tried to take what wasn't his. One of the shell subsidiaries, Rowan Project Services, suddenly found its accounts frozen. Victor had attempted to move funds. That was enough. Arthur called within minutes. He crossed the line. I looked at the workshop one last time. Release everything, I said. By morning, the story broke. Not as scandal, as truth. Emails, records, timelines. The narrative flipped overnight. Victor Rowan went from heir to cautionary tale. Charges followed. Civil suits. Criminal investigations. He disappeared from headlines as quickly as he dominated them. When it was over, truly over, I stood once again in the workshop. The rocking chair was finished now. Perfect curve. Solid joints. I sat in it and listened to the quiet. The empire still existed, but it no longer owned me. And somewhere in that silence, I understood the final lesson Celeste had left me. Power isn't what you take. It's what you refuse to become. The silence didn't last. It never does. 3 days after the final documents went public, after Victor's name slid from headlines into footnotes, I woke to the sound of tires on gravel outside my house. Not one car. 2. I didn't rush to the window. I'd learned what urgency cost. I poured coffee first. Steady hands. Familiar routine. When I finally looked out, a black SUV sat behind a white sedan I recognized immediately. Arthur. The other car was unfamiliar. That told me everything. They didn't knock this time. Arthur had keys. He always had, even when we pretended otherwise. He let himself in, his expression unreadable. Followed by a woman in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, hair pulled back tight enough to suggest she preferred control to comfort. Morning, Arthur said. I nodded. You brought company. This is Mara Klein, he said. Federal prosecutor. Financial crimes. Mara didn't offer a hand. She studied the room the way Victor used to, searching for leverage, weaknesses, tells. She didn't find any. People like her rarely did in places that didn't pretend to be impressive. We won't waste your time, she said. I'm here because your name keeps coming up in conversations I don't like. That's a familiar problem. I replied. Arthur sighed softly. Mara opened a tablet. Your ex-wife's company laundered money for nearly a decade. You took the fall for the operational side. We knew that. What we didn't know was how deep the investor network went. I said nothing. We've been tracking offshore accounts tied to the same consortium Celeste dealt with, she continued. Dubai, Zurich, Cayman. But the structure was elegant. Whoever built it understood both construction contracts and forensic accounting. Arthur glanced at me. Briefly, you're here to arrest me? I asked. No, Mara said. If that were the case, I wouldn't be standing in your kitchen. Then why are you here? She leaned forward. Because Victor made a mistake. Of course he did. He tried to leverage his mother's former investors to regain influence, she said. Reached out through intermediaries. Offered testimony in exchange for protection. Arthur exhaled slowly. And I asked, and they panicked, she said. They didn't expect him to know as much as he does. I nodded. He knows fragments. Enough to be dangerous. Exactly, Mara said. So they're moving money, scrubbing records, burning paper trails. She tapped the tablet. And your name came up again. I smiled faintly. It always does. We know you kept copies, she said. Not a question. Arthur stiffened. I looked at him. Relax. She knows. Mara didn't blink. We're not here to take them from you. No, she said. We're here to ask for your help. Arthur looked at me sharply. Absolutely not. Arthur, I said calmly. This isn't your responsibility anymore, he snapped. You've done enough. Mara met his gaze. With respect, counselor, your client is already involved, whether he likes it or not. I sighed. What exactly do you want? Context, she said. Interpretation. You built the firewall. You know where the seams are. I stared at my coffee. The steam curled upward, disappeared. I gave my life to protect one person once, I said. It cost me everything. And it saved an empire, she replied. An empire I never wanted. She nodded. Then help us dismantle the parts that still hurt people. Arthur's voice was tight. You're asking him to relive all of it. I'm asking him to finish it, Mara said. Silence filled the room. Finally, I stood. Give me 48 hours, I said. I'll tell you what I know. Arthur grabbed my arm. Julian, I'm done running, I said quietly. Mara stood. We'll be ready. They left together. Arthur stayed behind. You don't owe them anything, he said. I owe myself, I replied. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened the digital archive again. Not the confessions. The schematics. The flow charts. The quiet architecture beneath the crime. By dawn, I understood something that made my stomach drop. Celeste hadn't just accepted dirty money. She'd outgrown it. In the final years, she'd reversed the leverage, used the consortium's dependence on her brand to dictate terms, controlled timelines, bottlenecked access. She'd been planning an exit. And Victor, arrogant, desperate Victor, had just alerted them that the exit documentation existed, which meant one thing. They wouldn't stop at lawyers. The second knock came that evening. Not polite, not measured. 3 hard raps. I didn't open the door. The window shattered instead. I moved without thinking, years of construction site reflexes kicking in, down the hall, into the workshop, behind the heavy bench. Footsteps, 2 of them, voices low, foreign accents. Check the office. Kitchen's clear. I reached into the false compartment beneath the bench and pulled out the old revolver I'd sworn I'd never need again. Arthur had insisted years ago, just in case. I waited. The workshop door creaked open. A silhouette filled the frame. I didn't fire. I spoke. You're early, I said. The man froze. I stepped into the light. You should have waited, I continued. Your timing is terrible. The second man appeared behind him, gun raised. I wouldn't, I said calmly. There are cameras. A lie. Mostly. They hesitated. That was enough. Sirens cut through the night. Mara moved fast. They were gone before she arrived, but not without leaving fingerprints, broken glass, and confirmation. They're spooked, she said later, standing amid the wreckage. You rattled them. They rattled themselves, I replied. She studied me. You okay? I nodded. Victor? She asked. He doesn't know what he started, I said. Arthur arrived just before midnight, took in the damage silently. This ends now, he said. Yes, I agreed. It does. The next morning, I handed Mara everything. Not selectively, not strategically. Everything. By the end of the week, arrests began overseas. Freezing orders followed. Shell companies collapsed like rotten beams. And Victor? Victor called me once. From a number I didn't recognize. They're blaming me, he said, voice shaking. They think I set them up. You did? I replied. I just wanted control, he whispered. You wanted power. I corrected. There's a difference. Silence. They're going to kill me, he said. No, I said. They're going to forget you. That hurt him more. When it was done, truly done, the workshop was repaired. The rocking chair sat by the window. I didn't move back to New York. I didn't take meetings. I installed locks. Better ones. And every morning, I watched the light cut across the floor, honest and quiet. The empire still existed. The truth was public. And for the first time in my life, nothing was chasing me anymore. But somewhere deep inside, I knew one final reckoning remained. Not with Victor. Not with Celeste. With myself. And that story wasn't finished yet. The days after everything collapsed were strangely quiet. Too quiet. That's how I knew it wasn't over. When systems fall, there's always debris. People scrambling. Someone trying to pull something out of the wreckage before it finishes burning. I felt in the way the phone didn't ring. In the way no one came looking for interviews or statements anymore. Silence like that isn't peace. It's recalculation. I spent most mornings in the workshop, not building anything useful. Just sanding old pieces of walnut I'd never finish. The motion kept my hands busy while my mind stayed alert. I'd learned long ago that the moment you think you're safe is the moment someone decides you're convenient. Arthur called on the fifth morning. They issued a sealed indictment, he said without preamble. For who? I asked. A pause. Then, Victor. I closed my eyes. Federal conspiracy, obstruction, attempted coercion of witnesses. Arthur continued. They finally connected his outreach attempts to the offshore network. He panicked, started deleting records that triggered flags. And the others? I asked. Some fled. Some were arrested abroad. A few are negotiating. I set the sanding block down. He's not built for this, I said quietly. No, Arthur agreed. He never was. Another pause. There's more, he added. Of course there was. He named you, Arthur said. I laughed once, short and humorless. Of course he did. He claims you manipulated Celeste into the original laundering structure, that you engineered everything and then sacrificed yourself strategically to gain control later. That's creative, I said. It won't stick, Arthur said quickly. We have too much documentation, too many timestamps, too many third-party witnesses. I know, I said, but that won't stop him from trying. Arthur hesitated. They want you to testify. I stared at the half-finished chair. In court? I asked. Yes. When? 2 months. 2 months. Time enough for fear to ferment, for lies to sharpen, for memory to blur. I'll do it, I said. Arthur exhaled. I hope you'd say that. I just didn't want to push. You didn't, I said. Celeste already did. The weeks leading up to it were methodical. Depositions, reviews, preparation. Mara handled most of it with a precision that bordered on surgical. She didn't coddle me. She didn't dramatize anything. She treated the story like what it was, a financial structure built under duress, exploited by greed, and finally dismantled by exposure. Victor tried to delay, claimed illness, claimed procedural violations, claimed incompetence of counsel. None of it worked. When the trial finally began, I flew back east alone. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Less grand. No marble theatrics. Just with flags and the low hum of restrained tension. Victor didn't look at me when I entered. He looked thinner, sharper around the edges. His confidence hadn't disappeared. It had hardened into something brittle. The kind of arrogance that survives only by pretending it's still invincible. When I took the stand, the room went very still. They swore me in. The prosecutor began gently. Background, career, marriage, collapse. I answered plainly. No embellishment. No heroics. Then came Victor's attorney. He was younger than I expected. Too eager. Too confident. Mr. Hale, he began, you expect this court to believe that you alone orchestrated a decade-long laundering operation without your wife's knowledge? No, I said. I expect the court to believe the truth. He smiled thinly, which is that I executed mechanics, I said, and she approved the outcomes. A murmur rippled through the room. So she was complicit, he pressed. She was desperate, I replied. There's a difference. Victor finally turned toward me. Isn't it true, the attorney continued, that you benefited from this arrangement? That you retained access, influence, proximity? I lost my license, I said calmly. My reputation, my career, my marriage, my son. And yet, he said, voice rising, you now stand to inherit. No, I cut in. I stand to testify. The judge raised a hand. Counsel. The attorney adjusted. Isn't it convenient, he said, that the man who claims moral high ground ended up with everything? The room waited. I looked directly at Victor. Nothing about this was convenient, I said. It was expensive, painful, and permanent. Victor's jaw tightened. The attorney scoffed. You expect us to believe this was sacrifice? Yes, I said, because sacrifice isn't noble. It's ugly. It costs you things you can't get back. Silence. The attorney tried one last angle. And you just expect us to take your word for it? No, I said. Mara stood. We don't need his word, she said. We have records. Boxes were wheeled in. Emails. Contracts. Original drafts. Metadata. Timestamp confession Celeste never sent but never erased. The defense folded slowly after that. Victor testified the next day. He unraveled on the stand, contradicted himself, overreached, tried to portray himself as a victim of manipulation while simultaneously insisting he'd always known best. The jury watched him carefully. They always do. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty on all major counts. Victor didn't look at me as they led him away. I didn't expect him to. Outside the courthouse, Arthur clapped a hand on my shoulder. "It's done," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." But closure is a moment. It's a process. I returned home quieter than before. I finished a rocking chair. I donated most of the inheritance quietly. Restorative funds. Legal aid. Architecture scholarships under a different name. I kept the workshop. I kept the mornings. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Celeste, about what she did right, about what she broke, about the cost of fear when it's paired with power. I don't forgive her, but I understand her. As for Victor, he wrote once from prison, a single page, no apology, no insight, just anger. I didn't respond, because some lessons don't need witnesses, and some stories end not with forgiveness, but with truth finally being allowed to stand on its own. And that, at last, was enough. The letter from Victor stayed unopened on my desk for weeks. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I already knew. People like him don't discover humility in confinement. They sharpen resentment. They rehearse alternate histories where they're still the hero and everyone else is a thief. I eventually threw it away without reading it. That was the last deliberate choice I made about him. Everything after that happened more quietly. But quieter doesn't mean smaller. The civil cases followed the criminal verdict like shadows. Creditors, former partners, shell companies that had existed only on paper suddenly wanted to be real. They wanted explanations, settlements, scapegoats. Most of them learned quickly that I wasn't interested in playing defense anymore. Mara handled what needed handling. Arthur cleaned up what could be salvaged. I signed what was fair and refused what wasn't. No grandstanding. No counterattacks. Just clean lines. And then there was my son. Evan hadn't spoken to me since the trial. Not during it. Not after the verdict. Not even when the news broke internationally and my name, long buried, was dragged back into public consciousness. This time rewritten. I didn't reach out. I'd learned the hard way that chasing people who need their illusions intact only makes them dig in deeper. He came on a Sunday. I knew it wasn't before I opened the door. The pause. The hesitation. The way the knock was too controlled to be casual. He looked older. Not physically. He still had the posture and grooming of someone used to privilege. But something had shifted behind his eyes. The certainty was gone. In its place was something more dangerous. Doubt without direction. "I don't want money," he said immediately, like he'd rehearsed it. I stepped aside. "Come in." He didn't sit at first. Just stood in the center of the room, like he wasn't sure where he belonged anymore. "They're calling me," he said. "Reporters. Old friends. People who disappeared when things were good and suddenly remember my number now that everything's poisoned." I waited. "They say you're some kind of martyr," he scoffed, "but the edge wasn't sharp. That you saved everything." I met his eyes. "I didn't save everything." He swallowed. "She lied to me." "Yes," I said, "for 20 years. "Yes, and you let her." That landed harder. "I let the lie stand," I said carefully, "because the truth would have destroyed more than it fixed at the time." He laughed bitterly. "That's convenient." "It's complicated," I replied. He finally sat. "I built my whole identity on that story," he said. "That you were weak. That you failed. That I survived you." I nodded once. "I know." "And now," he continued, voice tightening, "I don't know who I am without it." That was the first honest thing he'd said. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said quickly. "I don't even know if I believe you yet. But I need to understand why you didn't tell me. I leaned back. Because you didn't ask, I said. He flinched. You were angry, I continued. And anger needs a villain. I was convenient. You could have fought back. I did, I said softly. Just not where you could see it. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he asked, Do you hate me? I thought about it. No, I said, but I don't excuse you. He nodded, accepting that like a verdict. I don't know what happens now, he admitted. That makes two of us, I said. He stood after that. Didn't hug me. Didn't apologize. But when he left, he paused at the door. I don't know if I'll ever be what you want me to be, he said. I stopped wanting versions of people a long time ago. I replied, I just want honesty. He left without another word. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't return to normal. It recalibrated. I kept the workshop, but I also reopened an architectural firm under a different structure. No luxury projects. No vanity towers. Just community builds, libraries, clinics, affordable housing that didn't feel like punishment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man once accused of laundering money was now obsessive about transparency. I published the documents. Not all of them, just enough. The truth, released without commentary, has a way of correcting itself. Public opinion shifted again. Slowly, reluctantly. People don't like admitting they were wrong, especially about narratives they enjoy believing. I never gave interviews. I let the paper trail speak. One evening, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a watch. One of the ones from the penthouse safe. Empty velvet box. No note, just a watch. I recognized it immediately. Celeste had worn it once. Years ago, when she wanted to look invincible at a gala where she felt anything but. I closed the box. Some apologies come too late to matter. Others arrive exactly when they're meant to. I don't wear it. I keep it in the drawer of my desk, next to a set of blueprints for a public school expansion in a neighborhood no one used to invest in. Time, I've learned, doesn't heal anything. But truth gives you something better. It gives you ground. And for the first time in decades, I finally stood on mine. The first winter after everything came apart was the quietest I'd ever known. Not peaceful, quiet in the way snow muffles sound while still hiding ice underneath. I spent most mornings alone in the workshop before dawn, the heater ticking softly as it warmed the space. The smell of wood, oil, and old paper settled into me like muscle memory. Some habits survive even when the life built around them collapses. The school project moved forward faster than expected. City approvals, community meetings, parents who didn't trust promises anymore, but showed up anyway, because they'd learned hope was something you carried yourself. I listened more than I spoke. That was new. One evening, after a late meeting, I stayed behind as people filtered out. A woman lingered near the door, mid-40s, tired eyes, hands clasped like she wasn't sure she was allowed to ask something. My son wants to be an architect, she said finally. He's good at math, draws buildings all over his notebooks. But everyone keeps telling him people like us don't build things. We just live in them. I folded the plans in front of me carefully. People like you build everything. I said, you just don't usually get credit for it. She smiled, small and unsure, but real. Moments like that matter more than headlines ever did. The firm grew slowly, intentionally. No investors, no shortcuts. Every contract transparent enough that anyone could read it without a lawyer translating intent into something safer. That discipline cost money. I didn't mind. Money was never the thing I'd been short on. It was time, and time has a way of punishing arrogance. Arthur retired that spring. He invited me to dinner, something he'd never done before. No files, no strategy, just food and silence and a mutual understanding that some chapters don't need to be relived. You know, he said halfway through, most people who come out the other side of something like this try to reclaim status. I know. You didn't. I reclaimed myself. I said. He nodded once. That's rarer. The letter came in late March. Different handwriting. No threats. No legal language. Just one page. I don't know how to speak to you yet. I don't know if I deserve to. But I'm trying to learn who I am without excuses. I won't ask you for forgiveness. I won't ask you for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm finally listening, even if it's too late. No signature. I folded it and placed it in the same drawer as the watch. Listening, I'd learned, was the first step toward accountability. But it wasn't the same as repair. Repair takes time. And willingness. From both sides. Summer came quietly. The trial footage resurfaced online, clipped and reframed by people who hadn't been there. Some cast me as a saint, others as a mastermind who'd simply outlasted his enemies. Both versions missed the point. I wasn't either. I was a man who made one terrible choice to protect someone he loved, and spent decades paying for it. One afternoon, Mara stopped by unannounced. She looked lighter than the last time I'd seen her. Not happier, just unburdened. "They offered me a judgeship," she said casually, like she was mentioning the weather. I blinked. "Congratulations." "I haven't accepted." "Why not?" She smiled faintly. "Because I like fighting the right battles." She glanced around the workshop. "You ever think about disappearing?" "Every day," I admitted. And I realized disappearing is just another way of letting someone else write the ending. She nodded. "That's what I thought." Before she left, she paused. "You did more than clear your name." I waited. "You changed the outcome for people who will never know why they got a second chance." That stayed with me. The last loose thread surfaced in early autumn. A subpoena, not for me, for documents tied to the offshore network's remaining assets. International proceedings. Asset recovery. Names that still had power in rooms I'd never enter again. They asked if I'd testify once more. I declined, not out of fear, but because I'd already said everything that mattered. Truth doesn't need repetition to stay true. On the anniversary of the verdict, I took the day off. I drove out past the city, past the neighborhoods where my work had taken root, until the road thinned and the noise dropped away. I stopped near a river and sat on the hood of the truck, watching the water move without urgency. That's when I understood something I've been circling for years. Justice isn't a moment. It's not a verdict or a sentence or a public reckoning. Justice is what happens after. When you choose what kind of life grows in the space where harm once lived. I went home before dark, opened the drawer, took out the watch. Not to wear, but to finally put it somewhere it belonged. I placed it in a small box along with the letter, the key, and the first blueprint I'd drawn after reopening the firm, the one for the school. I sealed the box and slid it onto the shelf above my desk. Some artifacts don't need to be displayed. They just need to be acknowledged. That night, as I turned off the workshop lights, I realized something else. For the first time since that phone call years ago, the one meant to humiliate me, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not an apology. Not vindication. Not the next move. The story had finished telling itself. And this time, it ended not with power reclaimed, but with peace earned. Before you go, subscribe and drop a comment with where you're watching from. Every voice helps this story reach someone who might need it today. Thank you for watching.